Hello, welcome to Children's Church, VIA Technology. Good morning, good evening, whenever you're watching. Yesterday was the 4th of July. I hope you had a real good time, enjoyed it, but I also hope that you practiced those 3 W's. Wear the mask, right? Wait back 6 feet. Wash those hands. Keep them washed. And we may not like some of these rules, but they can help save lives or help people from getting it so bad. And children, this virus is mean, and way too many people are still getting sick. So please be careful, please. Children, do you know why we celebrate the 4th of July? It's the birthday of our country. And some of you know that because you've already studied about it in school. Well, I've got just a little bit of info I wanted to share with you about it. But we can't take too long because we've got to get back and find out what's going on with Joseph. July 4th is Independence Day, or also known as America's birthday in the United States. We celebrate the 4th of July because it represents the day that America became separate from British rule. The colonists decided to write a document. They were kind of like tired of what was going on, so they wanted something different. It was known as the Declaration of Independence. And on July the 4th, 1776, it was written. The White House celebrated the first 4th of July way back in 1801. And isn't that kind of strange that it was actually signed in 1776? So it was bound to be a celebration after that, but actually no big celebration in the White House till 1801. And we know that America has got some issues right now, but we've just got to talk to Jesus and ask him to help our country and its leaders, and that each one of us would do our part to keep praying for them and for our country. On now to find out about Joseph. Last week, Pharaoh was celebrating his birthday. At this big banquet, he called for his cupbearer and his baker. Remember their dreams? What did Joseph tell them? How their dreams would come true, and the cupbearer would get his job back. But the baker's life, well, it was done because he was killed. Well, after Joseph told the cupbearer his dream, he asked him to please put in a good word for him with Pharaoh. Finally, Joseph had hope of getting out of that dungeon, and he asked him again to please remember him. Well, we know, sadly, the cupbearer forgot all about Joseph and the favor that he had asked him. Time went on, day after day, month after month. Joseph listening to those dungeon doors open and close, but never to be coming for him. Sometimes people forget about us, or they forget maybe a promise that they made to us. But God never forgets us, and he didn't forget Joseph either. Joseph was not alone in that prison. God stayed with him. Not physically to where he could see him, but he gave him strength and comfort through his love, just like with us today. We can't see him, but we can sure feel his loving presence around us. And I kind of want to think that it was like God was just there with him in spirit with his arms around him, almost like giving him a big hug. And especially when he started getting maybe really down. Well, 2 long years later, 2 years, Pharaoh had a dream while he was standing on the banks of the Nile River. In this dream, he saw 7 fat cows coming up out of the river. Then 7 ugly, skinny cows came up out the river. Well, guess what happened? Those skinny, ugly cows ate the fat cows. Yes, they did. Then Pharaoh woke up. Well, after this, he fell asleep again. And then he had yet another dream. This time, he saw 7 fat ears of grain or corn, we'll say, growing on like one single stalk. Then 7 very thin or skinny ears of corn sprouted. The thin and skinny ears of corn ate the fat ears of grain or corn. Yep, sure did. Well, Pharaoh woke up, and this time he was very upset. I imagine he was very confused because he didn't know what this dream was all about. Well, he called on his advisors or his people that could supposedly interpret dreams, or at least, could make him feel better. How about the cupbearer is going to finally remember Joseph now and how he interpreted his dream? Well, it's about time, huh? The cupbearer told Pharaoh. Pharaoh called for Joseph to be released from prison. It was very unusual that Pharaoh would get advice from a slave or a prisoner, but Pharaoh sent for Joseph. God made it clear to Pharaoh that Pharaoh was not all-knowing, like he thought he was at times, and like the people thought he was. They even thought that he was God, or a God, but we know that he wasn't. We know that he was not a God. We know that there's only one true God. Now he needed Joseph's help. Pharaoh said, I've been told that you can hear a dream and you can explain it. Well, you know what Joseph told him? He says, I can't do it. But God will, Pharaoh, he said. Hebrews 1:16. Joseph did not take credit for being able to interpret that dream. He knew that his gift of interpreting dreams, that it came from God. Joseph was humble, and he even told Pharaoh about God. God gave these dreams to Pharaoh so that he would know what was coming. A terrible famine. They had 7 good years to prepare. God sent his servant Joseph to warn and prepare Pharaoh. What do we always say? God had a plan. Well, here's something interesting too. Because the dream was repeated twice, Joseph then told Pharaoh that God would soon make the dreams a reality. Well, Joseph told Pharaoh that God would give him the meaning of the dreams. So Joseph began to tell him that the fat cows and the fat or plump ears of grain or corn meant 7 good years. 7 good years. The good years, and it meant that everything would be fruitful, good fruitful years, and what have you. Food supply would be good. If that was the case, then what did the skinny, ugly cows mean? Those skinny cows and the thin ears of grain or corn represented a terrible famine that would come on the whole land. Both dreams meant the same thing. The first one was the 7 good years, and Egypt would thrive. The second one was the terrible 7 years. So what's a famine? It's an extreme scarcity of food or extreme hunger, starvation, probably not even any water either. So you got to remember, there was no Harris Teeters or Food Lines, no kind of grocery stores of any kind, no McDonald's, no fast food. There would be no food anywhere. People would be starving, and that was really sad. Well, Joseph told Pharaoh to choose a wise and understanding man and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. And Pharaoh should appoint officials under him. So during those 7 years when there was plenty of food, they would store up 1/5 of the food that was grown. That might not seem like a lot, but with having that real good harvest, I imagine it probably ended up being pretty good. And it had to be because it was going to have to last, for 7 years. They should put that extra food in big storehouses. Then, when the famine hit the land, the Egyptians could use the grain that was stored up. That way, the people would not starve. Now, that was a wise plan, don't you think? Even Pharaoh thought so. Well, so here's some more good news. Pharaoh was so impressed with Joseph. He saw how mature and knowledgeable he was about things and about these dreams. He was so pleased with him that he rewarded Joseph with gifts and a wife. Whoa, wait a minute. A wife? A wife? Well, that's what it said. But that's another whole story. But it's true. I found it in Genesis 41:45. This chapter in the Bible tells some very interesting things that happened in Egypt. Sorry about that little interruption. Anyway, at this time, Joseph was already 30 years old. This doesn't seem possible, but he was. And he had already been in Egypt for 13 years. When he first got there, things sure didn't look Miss Norma can't talk again. Things sure didn't look too good for him, did it? But children, we can all learn a lesson from Joseph. He didn't do unto others because they done unto him or because they were unkind to him. No revenge for this guy. He was a good person. He chose to act like God wanted him to and follow his teachings. And even when Miss Potiphar told that terrible lie on him and he got thrown in that dungeon for something he didn't do, he still didn't be ugly to somebody else and try to get revenge or anything. He just didn't do it. He was a good person. Wouldn't the world be a much better place if all of us would live according to God's way and not our way? I think so. All right, back to Joseph. Things are really looking good for him now. And Pharaoh has placed a lot of responsibility on Joseph. In fact, he has now made Joseph second in command. Listen to what Pharaoh told his servants. So, Pharaoh said to his officials, "The Spirit of God is in this man. We can't find anyone else like him, can we?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "God has made all of this known to you. No one is as wise and understanding as you are. You will be in charge of my palace. All of my people, in other words, everybody that was under him, everybody would have to obey Joseph's orders. I will be greater than you only because I'm the one who sits on the throne. That was Genesis 41:38 through 40. And he was saying again, the only reason that he wouldn't be up there with him was because he was the actual king and he would be the one on the throne. Can you imagine the surprised look on Joseph's face? Joseph never imagined Pharaoh would choose him to do such an important job. Next to Pharaoh, Joseph would be the most powerful man in all of Egypt. That's a big responsibility, an important responsibility. He was going to have a lot going on with him. Well, let's leave Joseph with that shocked look on his face until next Sunday, and we'll find out more about Joseph again. So you take care of each other and love each other. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for so many wonderful blessings on us. Please help us to live our lives more your way than our way. We know you have a plan for each of our lives, and I pray that we live them in a way that's pleasing to you. Thank you for the children and their families, and I ask you to please keep them safe. Also, could you please comfort their hearts from so much trouble that's going on in our lives and in our country? God, can you please show us how to help make America a better place? Thank you. Amen. And all of God's children said, I love you, Jesus.